Hello there. This is Benjamin Morse, comic book artist, and my assistant, Longshot. And we are coming to you from high atop Bear Mountain to, as always, talk about some comic books. So, in this video, I was going to go through, I was developing a cover this week for my sequel to August Purgatory Underground, which, by the way, is out in stores now, and you can check out from Red 5 Comics. If any of this sounds interesting, please talk to your local comic shop and see if they can order you a copy. But that one's out in the stores. I'm working on wrapping up Scarlet Twilight, but just to make sure I don't get too rusty on my drawing as I'm coloring, primarily, I was working on the cover for the August sequel, which is going to be called Decimation Angels. So, one thing I knew, I had a vague idea of what I wanted to have for this cover, but I knew that I look at my drawings lately and I'm very happy with some of the technical things about them. But, and this is super important to a cover, I'm always looking for ways to really pump up the dynamism. August is a pretty quiet character, although his stories are very action packed and fanciful in terms of all the science fiction stuff. But he's a quieter guy, and that changed a little bit in the later stories. But one of the approaches I've taken is I always want to make that artwork as dynamic as possible. Some parts of Scarlet Twilight that I'm trying to make retro, I simplify things because some of the things happening are so crazy that you want to let the situations speak for themselves. With August, I always want to have anything I can do in there to just really make something pop. So as I was planning this out, I kind of had an idea for the layout and the setting, which is pretty suggested by what the story is going to be. But I also wanted to look at some examples that would kind of help us out in terms of making this super dynamic. So the first thing that came to mind was Stephen Platt's work. I don't know if you guys remember in the 90s when his stuff came out. I can almost remember where I was the first time I saw this stuff. People were like, did you see this guy doing Moon Knight? It's crazy. And even though at times I had trouble understanding what was happening on the page, just the impact of those drawings were crazy. Now, I'm not going to draw like him. I don't think I could or ought to. But I did want to go back and pull in some elements from his things that made things look so dynamic. And I think the mixture of more realistic drawing that's a little more in keeping with modern stuff and certainly more how I do things, I wanted to see if there's some spots that I could get that dynamism into my cover. So the first thing that always makes sense to do is look at some examples. And there's some cool stuff here. This lighting is, I've seen a lot of things like it, but it's a lot stronger. It's almost an iconic, shape here when you look at it. And I've seen that in a lot of his things. I've seen a lot of this where you have the lighting coming up, even if it doesn't totally make sense. You kind of have two light sources on the surface. The way that these biceps are shaded is really strong, and these things all really pop. Another thing was this cape, all this line work and energy. And that's going to get dialed back a lot in the color, but it's good that it's there. It's adding a lot of energy. Looking at this old Prophet stuff, which some people kind of ironically enjoy. I don't ironically enjoy this. I just think it's great. Again, it's not what I do necessarily, but I think back of the impact this had, and it's huge. I really enjoyed looking at it as a kid. I enjoy looking at it now. This is a little bit dialed back than his initial stuff in terms of it's a little clearer, but I think that dynamism is still there. So another one here. Again, we got the way the biceps are shaded. Again, we've got the lighting coming from the top and the bottom. Something I'm going to look at. This was another thing. This is a little more detailed version of the lighting I was pointing out before in the face. I'm liking this chin highlight for, no reason realistically I think that would be there, but I think it's strong. I think it has a lot of impact. Kind of the same thing happening here. You've got this light coming in from the cheekbones. Again, it's not the most realistic thing. I don't think it violates reality though to the point that it wouldn't be worth doing if it adds impact. So with those things in mind, I started developing my cover roughs, and this is kind of how I do those. I knew this is going to be a sort of decimated, environment with some science fiction elements. These are going to be our bad guys up here that have wings that kind of resemble angels, and you'll learn more about them obviously in the story. August's uniform I had designed for a long time, and I'm sort of here just working out how the colors of the background are going to play against his colors. Roughed out the pose here, and I'll continue to refine a little bit in my sketches, but I'm going to redo that once I go to the drawing stage. I knew I wanted him to have this sword, which is kind of almost like a tool or an implement. It's not necessarily a weapon, but I wanted to have this, and this doesn't come across in this pose where he's old and he's kind of leaning on it in some respects. So as I kind of took that a little further, I'm bringing in some of the lighting that we saw in those Stephen Platt images. And what I hope I'm doing is using that intelligently. There was an interview with Bruce Timm I'd read when he was talking about his Kirby inspired stuff and how he'd use the Kirby squiggles specifically. And I thought what he did was incredibly intelligent. He kind of said, I don't want to just put him in there for the sake of putting him in there. Everybody does that. But what I'd like to do is if I have a situation where a gestural line that's in my sketch can be reinforced or echoed by a Kirby squiggle, that's my logic for using it. I hope that's what I'm doing with this lighting and some of the shading I discussed earlier. I'm taking some of that. I'm certainly doing my own drawing. I'm approaching it the way I approach things. But where there are opportunities for those things to bleed in, I want to use them and see, hey, does this make my image pop more? August is a unknown character, more or less. You know, I can't just put Batman on the cover. I don't have Spider-Man. I need this to look so cool that you give him a chance, maybe over one of those comics. So that's my, that's the reason I'm going into this with the goal of adding just every little bit of pop that I can. So I'm refining the sketch some more, positioning. I kind of want this garbage behind him to look like wings, just to echo what's happening with these guys. In this way, I always want to try this color scheme. It's on the cover of August Purgatory Underground, but my thinking is, while it's cool and is a little bit more in my sensibilities as an artist, it just doesn't pop. So as I kept refining these guys, trying to make that work, I ended up going back to my red bright sky, because it's just stronger. It's more apocalyptic. It's more overwhelming. And again, I'm just aiming to have this pop as much as I can. So from there, I started my cover drawing and thought, once I realized, hey, I could make a video out of this, I started taking some screenshots and can kind of take you through that process. So you can see here, this is that lighting we talked about, or that I pointed out. And I think I'm looking at it from a different angle, and that's sort of more what I would draw, but I think it adds some real pop. And I was glad that I had brought that into it. So as I went on, I'm refining some things. I ended up redrawing that hand because it just looked like he had kind of his arm was stiff or something like that. Some of the shading here, again, on the pecs, and then on the bicep here is stuff I looked at. It's not how I'd normally shade it, but I thought it looked cool. And that's what I'm doing here is I'm trying to look at old things, saying, hey, if I can throw that in, does it look cool? Does it fit with my style? And does it add? And I'll just take you through. Again, I'm adding and refining some stuff. I had did not like my initial take on the poncho here, so I kind of redid this. Anyway, I'm doing that. I'm adding my outlines. I'm adding my costume details here, adding the ripping, because of course this takes place so much further after August Purgatory Underground, and he's going to have that same poncho he had in his initial adventure, but I want to show, hey, it's old. He's old. Things have happened. Adjusted kind of my head here to be a little more heroic. Took the shoulders out a little bit. This I made a lot bigger than in my first sketch. I don't know if I took a export of that first version where this hand was smaller, but again, I wouldn't exaggerate, especially if I'm drawing somewhat realistically in terms of shading and not going crazy with proportions. I always want to pop up a little bit to be heroic. So your smaller head, your bigger hands, bigger shoulders, things like that. So I'm still adding here. And this, again, that cape shading is kind of just taken straight from that one example I was looking at. And I threw in my shading here I could throw it against my background, which I've been working on in the tandem on a different layer. I just wanted clear exports to kind of show what I'm doing here. And then turn those layers on. And I'm, kind of liking this. So I'm still refining it, adding some color and any sort of contrast you can get, even here on the shoulder. Normally I just use one color on this rim lighting, but I threw in some whites, and this is actually like a 90, let's say 95 or something like that. Not totally white, but I was looking at some Alex Sinclair stuff, and he kind of takes his rim lighting, but also throws a little variation. So this is a little darker, it's a little bit lighter. Again, I'm looking for, like I said before in the drawing, just a little more pop wherever I can get it. So I'm still refining that. I think that's the last one I have. If you like this, if you think the character looks cool, if you'd like to see what happened to him before, if you'd like to see this poncho when it was in a good state, please give it a look. And I will keep making videos on this, take you through some more of the development of this. And as I'm finishing up Scarlet Twilight, probably have a few more movies about the process there. I hope you like the video, and keep checking out the channel if you want to see more stuff like this.